Hey, my name's John Leon, and I am the bassist, founder, songwriter, and other instrumentalist in the studio for the band White Wizzard. I started the band in 2007. I've been its sole member, and I've decided it's time to tell the White Wizzard story in its entirety from my point of view. And no one's really heard that. They've read little things here and there, and I think a lot of people have been programmed to not like me, whether it be through assumption or through things that were written by bloggers with agendas or ex-members with an axe to grind, which I affectionately call the ex-wives club. And we'll uh, we'll get into a lot of stories. I'm sure there will be all sorts of interesting things you will come to find that may enlighten you on some things that you didn't know. Now, I know there's a constituency of people that no matter what I say, I'm sure there's plenty of you looking at the screen right now going, I don't like you, and what's James Paul Luna think? And, I'm sure there'll be plenty of those guys. And, oh, your band sucks, bro, and fuck you. And I know that. I know probably a good percentage of people that will watch this will watch it out of hatred, of like or just the fodder of whatever White Wizard's been to them through their point of view and their lens. Um, but for the unbiased fan or person that is curious what my side of the story is, I've been there from the beginning. I've seen it all. I've been through it. I lived through it. And I thought it would be interesting to tell the story, tell everything, so a lot of people can be enlightened on things that are, what they've probably read or heard has been inaccurate or spun a lot of times. Now, that's not to say I'm not without blame. I will definitely point the lens at myself for my mistakes, and there's a large cast of characters. There's a lot of layers to the onion. It's very Spinal Tap. It's very comedy and tragedy. White Wizzard, it's the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. It's all kind of rolled into one. So it makes kind of an interesting story. So for those of you that care or those of you that are curious, I'm going to go through the entire story, lineup by lineup, event by event. It'll be in lots of chapters. I will probably do an audiobook as well of this story for those that want to hear it, because I do think it's a story worth telling. And I think for me too, I think I finally feel like it's time for me to tell my side of the story from the beginning to end and have people hear my take on it. They've heard a lot of other people's takes on it, but they haven't heard my story and take on it, which is I was there in the trenches. I mean, I started this thing. So, and I would implore people to have an open mind. I think obviously everyone's going to be, curious what, other people's stories are, etc. And there's always the adage, the truth lies somewhere in between, right? I guess if that's your mentality, I understand. And I don't expect everybody to sit down and listen to this with an open mind. But I can unequivocally say the stories that I'm going to tell happened. It's 100% truth. I don't have any reason to spin anything or lie about anything. For those of you that want to take me seriously and listen and get a unbiased perspective, well, that's what this is for, and that's who this is for. The rest of you whose minds are made up, then throw eggs at the screen or flip me off or whatever you need to do. I think at this point, with what I've been through with the band, what I've endured, etc., I've kind of earned the right to tell this story, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna tell the fucking story, and I'm sure some panties will be twisted because there's some ex-members of this band that have kind of hid behind the John Leon fodder, and everyone assuming that I am doing X, Y, or Z, when in reality, a lens has not been put on, a microscope has not been put on, so to speak. A lot of things that they did that caused the problems and eventual issues for the band, but also there's a lot of great contributions to the band. It's kind of a mixture of, I respect every musician that's been in the band for their talents. That's why I brought them in. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that happened that weren't accurately represented. So I think, it's always important for the story to be told. And people can filter that however they want to. And they can either look at it unbiased and really, weigh the whole thing and, decide what they feel themselves, and that's fine. Whatever anybody feels is and what their conclusions are is their conclusions. And I know there's nothing I can do about that. I can't change how people perceive me. I think unbiased, balanced people, I think, though, can watch this, and I think they'll be quite interested in what I have to say. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. So the first aspect of what I want to touch on in this first quick chapter is kind of the beginnings, the struggle up to the formation of White Wizzard. And so I want to tell a little bit about myself. I grew up in Sonoma County, California. That's about an hour north of San Francisco in the wine country. I have a lot of family up there, a lot of generations in the Sonoma Valley and that whole area as it came up over the decades and became the region it is now. A lot of history and roots there. And, my home life was pretty fried when I was a teenager. Things were crazy. I was in a Catholic boys' school. My parents divorced, and I left home when I was about 16. I didn't get along with my stepmom very well, and everything was just crazy and chaotic. And my dad wasn't around much, and my mom and I weren't speaking. So it was like this crazy time. So I ended up in this, that typical place that a lot of teenagers do, where I just was like going a million miles an hour and living like I was going to die at 25. I was experimenting with drugs and partying and drinking. I had a bottle of whiskey in my hand every night. I was this crazy, wild, I was a bad influence. You weren't the guy, I wasn't the guy you wanted around your kids when I was 17, 18 years old, that's for sure. It was a crazy time, man. And I was on a one-way trip to death. I was wild, I was crazy. And I almost did die a couple of times, and there's some crazy stories from back then. I won't get into those now, but bottom line is I eventually pulled myself together. I had this passion for music, and I wanted to be successful in it, and I think that is what caused me to care about my health, care about how I was living. I was seeing people older than me, how they were their lives were going to shit, and I was like, well, I don't want to end up there. So, in my early 20s, I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to college. And, I was out of school for a couple of years after high school. And I had a lot of interests. I was a super smart kid. So I went back to college and got my life together, sobered up, all that typical stuff. And just all I could come back to was music. I was taking these different classes, considering majoring and all this stuff, and did a couple of semesters. And I remember talking to a professor of mine, and she was like, look, it's clear that music is, all you want to do. You can always come back to college. So why don't you just go for it? And I said, you know what, fuck it. She's right. And I was working at this job for this company, and I wasn't really stoked on it. It was kind of monotonous. And I got an opportunity to audition for a band. I'd been going to LA off and on over the few years. I would sometimes drive down literally to audition and drive back all in one day. Like I'd get home at like 7 a.m. like delirious from driving, constantly and doing an audition back and forth. Talking 7 hours each way. But I was crazy like that. And I finally found a band that I felt strong about called Ultra Vibe. And this was in the summer of 2002. And I just broke up with a long-term relationship that had gone to hell. I was kind of in this point of wanting change, and I think I wanted to get out of my hometown. I'd always been afraid to venture out permanently from the Bay Area. So moving to LA and joining a band was a big deal for me, and I did it, and I dove in with both feet and really never looked back. That band didn't end up lasting. They had some internal issues. They were a great band, more like Tool, Perfect Circle, that kind of era stuff, but it was really good. Great singer, great songs. And then I started tooling around in different bands the next 2-3 years, and I was in what I would call the struggle. I moved to LA just with a van and a little bit of money, and threw my stuff in a storage unit, and I lived basically out of the van, our rehearsal space, and got a health club membership to take showers in Hollywood. And I literally all day would hang out in music stores. Everybody knew me by a first name basis in LA. It was crazy in those music stores. I was there all the time, playing instruments, hanging out with the pro audio guys, learning about recording, yada yada. And I was playing bass in various bands. I was kind of a journeyman bassist, and I would sleep in my van at the beach or in Hollywood somewhere. I found all these pockets off Laurel Canyon where I could park and sleep. And in a lot of ways, it was like the funnest 2 years of my life, 2-3 years, because it was it was just being immersed in the struggle. It was like there was nothing. I had nothing and I needed nothing in a way except for my instruments and my basics, and I didn't have any responsibilities. I wasn't worried about car payments, rent payments. Literally, I had a phone payment and a gym membership payment and part of our rehearsal space. But I mean, I was able to hustle and generate enough money for that. I had some money saved, etc. So it was this great couple of years. And I recommend to anybody who's an artist, don't be afraid to immerse yourself in the struggle. You really find yourself in it. And in a lot of ways, it's what defines you. And, sometimes when artists get successful, they lose connection to what they were in the struggle. I think that's your truest self. And so that was a really special time for me. And I just want to touch on that I went through all that and what my story was getting to LA and being a journeyman bass player. And that was basically it. Once I, was playing in various bands and I was working, I found a relationship, started having a job, and eventually ended up moving in with the girl that I was dating, and worked my way up to the amazing year of 2007, which is where I will leave part one. I'm going to start part two from what is going to basically be the formation of the first White Wizzard lineup and the band. So until chapter two, I'll see you then.